one of the things that I hear in talking to people about translation, and about education, both of which are things in which I'm involved, is that the globalization of English, as you say, globish, or however you want to talk about it, endangers not only other languages, but also, in a way, English, because we adopt a standard of English then which we're not able to perhaps express our most sophisticated ideas. So I would say that we need not only to focus on the individual languages and developing them, and perhaps shifting the balance of power from only English or mostly English, a situation in which we have to really fight against the trend. I think, as in this case of Wikipedia, we have a lot of energy coming from other languages who desire that recognition and need to be heard, but it's not yet, perhaps, the dominant trend. So I would say, yes, let's work on English, and let's work on including other languages, but also trying to maintain a very high level, which means a literary and a poetic level, as well as a science and a business level.
Well, since we talk about that, I mean, Mamadou mentioned it as well. There is competition in this world, and the competition begins on the labor market. When I graduated from the university and I looked for a job, I was able to say, look, I speak English. And the potential employers in front of me during job interviews would say, wow, that's great. Today, my children, if they say that they speak English, the potential employer will say, yes, of course, and what else?
Well, in New York City, if you want a job today, you might as well speak Spanish or Chinese.
Or both.
Or Arabic.
Oh. And if you get Arabic, you can maybe work in Langley as well. Sorry, I couldn't miss this one. It was not rehearsed. Now, the question around this, as far as I'm concerned, I'm absolutely convinced that you cannot really get to know a culture without at least mastering the language to some extent. Frank, you are German originally, and Susanne, you said you speak German. The arguably greatest German author, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, once said, those who don't speak other languages know nothing of their own. What do you think about that?
So I think that's very true. And if you look at language, I think that learning a language is much more than just learning how to communicate in that language. It's, you learn a lot about the culture. Learning a language changed a lot, and today is much more in school. You learn much more than just the skills to communicate. You learn a lot about the culture of that specific country as well. Now, the second aspect is reflecting back, and that's something that I've gone through since I moved to the United States in 2008. And I can tell you, like, looking at Germany through the lens of someone who's not living in Germany can be sometimes funny. And for me, this is a very interesting aspect, because reflecting back on your own culture, living in a different country, and learning that language is what you need to do in order to move to another country, is something that is fascinating and that enriches your own life. And I think that's very true.
An Egyptian friend of mine was giving a talk in Alexandria in front of 200 of his compatriots, and I was probably the only non-Egyptian in the room. And suddenly he stops and says, do you want to know what Egypt is? And everybody was like, what is he babbling about? We are Egyptians. And then he went, if you want to know what Egypt is, go to Europe, go to America, go to Australia, go anywhere you want for a year or two. When you'll come back, you will know what Egypt is, because a fish doesn't know what water is. And then I suddenly realized that he was also talking for me, because I was actually living in Egypt. I don't pretend that I understood anything of Egypt, but I understood what being Western actually means. I did not know that before. Same thing. Having access to all knowledge, that's more or less what Frank was saying. How does that enrich local culture and power it to go global, in your view?
I think basically what happened in particular Wikipedia, but also with the fact that people are circulating more than ever, that the internet offers a space in which people can interact, and people from completely different geographical location. It is possible to acquire knowledge, and it is possible to produce and share knowledge from your own location. And I think it's what has changed, that we are no longer living in corners and being invisible. The fact is, thanks to the internet, thanks to new medias, people are able to showcase what they do and share information. And people are also able to engage from different points of departure. And I think this is what has changed, that today from Dakar, you can engage people in France or in New York, and languages are more accessible. Senegalese young rappers, they sing that New York and Paris are the suburbs of Dakar, which is showing that ways in which knowledge, sounds, way of dancing are taking different paths.
I love that one. New York and Paris as suburbs of Dakar. I will quote you on this, Mamadou. You can be sure.
I think we need to focus on a true global values which will bring us all humans together. And you rest assured, all of us here in this hall, that there are so many global values will bring us together. One of them is education, we know, rather than consumerism related. So I think that is needed very badly. We would like to replace these noble global values instead of wars, conflicts, misunderstandings, stereotypes, and we do have the means now. Thank you.
The problem is that we are living at a moment which is not the first moment of globalization. You had different moments of globalization. We forget that 1,000 years ago, China, which arrived in Africa long before the European, took the decision not to globalize, to stop the opening and expansion of China. We know also a period where you have a very specific globalization, which was a globalization which went with the beginning of capitalism, which Karl Marx said it was a moment of blood and mud, which is the globalization of slavery, etc., etc. The problem is now, how do we change this moment? What are the resources available to us, in particular people who are against, for completely different reasons, for ideological reason, for political reason, but even for just natural resources, environmental reason. And this is precisely where education could play a role. This is precisely where we have all of us to fight in order to preserve all the languages, in order to preserve all the cultures, to keep precisely our human condition being improved from different corners. How are we going to change it is the key question. Do we have the resources, in particular, the political resources to change it?